Hello, this is Brett Knowles from PM Square Consulting. This is a really quick overview of how OKRs play a key role in financial planning. Here's how it all goes, right? Strategy is the beginning of any planning process. So once we get the strategy, we then need to sort of translate that strategy into operational terms, right? Get out of the long-term view that a strategy is into what do I need to do this quarter, next quarter, the quarter after that, all in aid of achieving that longer-term goal. So we're aligning the organization to this strategy and breaking that long-term strategy into shorter-term objectives. And what we're also doing here is clearly defining the outcomes through our key results that we expect to achieve with this strategy. So we're testing the hypothesis. Now, what always happens is when you build the OKRs, you sometimes discover that, gosh, we don't have the resources or the capability of executing the strategy. So there's that update loop. We call this making strategy everyone's everyday job. Day to day, we should be able to take a look at our OKRs, see how we're achieving them, and be able to give leadership feedback on how we're doing against achieving those strategic objectives. And this also begins making strategy a continuous process, which of course is super important in turbulent times like we have right now with COVID-19. So that loop is what we call strategic learning loop, where we get that constant feedback about strategy. So strategy is no longer an annual process. It's a continuous process. And in fact, when we hit particular tripwires, performance levels in the OKRs, we should be able to trigger a new strategy thinking session so that we have a new hypothesis to go forward with. From there, the next step is to translate that into currency. Now, the dilemma here is we lose a lot of relevance. This particularly happens in the intangible asset world. So things like this video, the fact that you can watch this video for free, does that mean it doesn't add value? I should hope not. But the dilemma is dollars, currency, don't accurately represent value transformation as we have it in today's society. So the OKRs do a better job of talking about value creation. The budget loses a bunch of relevance because it can only capture the parts of your strategy that can be dollarized and other things aren't there. So there's a dollar impact, for example, of employee engagement, but the dollars don't tell us everything about having an engaged employee community, etc. But unfortunately, we still have to translate those OKRs into financial terms. From there, we should be able to fund the performance that goes on. So that funding loop is all about providing you with the resources, whether it be dollars or headcount or partnerships, whatever it might be, so that you can go off and get the performance that is asked of you and that you contract with when you accept the budget. Again, a feedback loop. We should be able to feed back to the budget how you're performing, what you've been able to deliver with the resources you've been given. And that's just financial reporting. Now, the good news about financial reporting is it's terribly accurate. The bad news is it's stuck inside the constraints of GAAP. We have to do our financial reporting within generally accepted accounting principles, and therefore it misses all sorts of key elements of strategy and elements of what our performance is. So we actually need a second feedback loop. And the second feedback loop goes straight up to OKRs. And that's the real life performance reporting, right? That's where we're looking at non-financial measures as well as financial measures to feedback on how we're doing against our strategic objectives. So that second loop, the one at the bottom, is what we call the management control loop. So we have two loops, strategic learning, management control loops. And these interact with each other to create the management system in our organizations. Now, this top area here with the blue is, the world of strategic freedom and capability to act, right? This is the dream world where you're not anchored in the realities of today's constraints, or at least you should not be. The bottom part is more about the world of top-down control and service level agreements or performance agreements between departments. And so it's about the execution cycle. So what we end up with is these two different loops, right? The strategic loop the budget loop, and they interact with each other to give us this area in the center, which are OKRs. OKRs are the center of our performance structure and the connection between strategy and execution. The issue with OKRs, a lot of the work I've just shared with you is based on the work I was involved with at Harvard and Balanced Scorecard Collaborative back in the late 90s, is all about strategy execution. But the pace of strategy execution is much faster now than it was back then in the 90s. And I can't wait a year to refresh my strategy or my objectives. It has to be done at least quarterly and perhaps even more frequently, like this year in COVID-19. So that's the strategy, OKR, budget, performance system that is inside all of our organizations and how they link together. I hope this has been useful to you in helping understand the connection between the accounting world and the strategy world.